Make that big boss less special. It ain't no game, but they saying welcome to the second level. Second level. Second level, baby. Second level.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for coming on out. It is my pleasure to present our next speaker, Jonah Davidson.
Thank you very much. All right, just give me a second. Okay, so my talk is called Sustainable and Inclusive Game Dev Communities, what we've learned at Dirty Rectangles. I'll explain what that means in a minute. But just to start, before I start anything else, this is me, and that's my dog. So my name is Jonah Davidson, sometimes known as Hangman. I'm a community organizer for Dirty Rectangles, which is our local independent game developer meetup outreach group, essentially, in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. I'm a hobbyist game developer, not a professional. Professionally, I'm a technical writer. I do some graphic and logo design work. I do some other fun stuff on the side. I do a lot, and I'm very tired, but I do a lot. Oh, yes. There's me. I'm on the left, and my dog, FBI Special Agent Francis York Morgan, is on the right. Dirty Rectangles, as I mentioned, is our local meetup group. Video games culture in Ottawa since 2010 is our slogan. I don't know why we have a slogan, but our goals are to support the local community, outreach to other communities, and sustain the local community. To that end, we have monthly show and tell meetups, annual barbecues, and other small events scattered here and there, basically wherever we can find the time and the bandwidth. And our goal is just repping local games, locally and abroad, trying to spread the word, and also bring in people who can come and see what we're cooking up in Ottawa, because it's a fairly quiet city. And lastly, supporting local game advocacy groups. We have our local equivalent of Girls Make Games, or Pixels, called Girl Force 613. And we also help out with a local incubator called the Capital Game Hub. So we are technically a not-for-profit artist collective, which will be relevant. Just a little bit about Ottawa, because this is also important. It's the actual capital city of Canada, actual, not Toronto. It's the 4th largest city in Canada. Toronto's the biggest. It has a population of about 1.5 million. We have multiple universities and colleges with very good game dev, CS, art, and design programs. And we have multiple small contracted mobile studios and some indies, but no AAA. We don't have Ubisoft like Montreal. We don't have IDOS like Toronto. It is a moderately big, sprawling mess. This will be important in a few minutes. So this talk is going to be about 5 different things about your particular community in whatever city you come from or wherever city you're going to live in the future. The scale of your scene, money to run events, because it does cost money, initiatives to benefit your scene, inclusion to grow and improve the scene, and the realities of doing this. So I'm going to start with scale. My goal with this is to have a takeaway at every possible level. So whatever the scale is of the scene in your area, there will be a takeaway for you. The same to do with money, whatever type of money you've got coming in or no money, there will be a takeaway for you. So scale, small scale. Who's involved? You and a few folks, probably you and a couple people you know. What you're doing, you're making do with what you've got. Your meetups are you guys getting together, maybe in a coffee shop or something. Where do you meet? Wherever you can. Probably a coffee shop, maybe a bar, maybe a campus. So how do you grow? You find people around you. You let people know that you're there as best you can, but there's not a whole lot that you can do because there's only a few of you. The takeaway at this level is don't worry about not growing, but also don't just hang around with your existing friends and call it a meetup. Be open, be friendly, do a little bit of work, give it a name, put it out there, let other people know that there is a meetup of some kind or another, even if it's just the 4 of you. At a medium scale, maybe you've got 10 to 30 folks, maybe a couple regulars, a small studio or indie shop in your city. What you've got, maybe, hopefully already, are simple meetups, just establishing yourselves and each other, showing your work. Maybe not doing a whole lot more than that, but that's great. Maybe you've got a venue, hopefully for free. At this scale, you want to keep it small. So how you grow at this point is by becoming a known presence, by actually putting yourself out there for other people in the city or in your scene to find. Because there may be other people out there that you don't know about yet or haven't found you yet. So you can do that online, you can do that locally, you can put up posters, whatever you think you can do the most easily to grow your scene at this scale. Focus on collaboration and support, advocate for each other, seek out different people and perspectives, and you'll slowly grow because you just want to keep encouraging people to keep coming out and showing their work. Large scale. This is where Ottawa's at, I'd say. Maybe you have 30 plus folks. We have about 60 on a good night. But you also have consistent regulars and more than just you and 4 friends. What you do? Meetups. Maybe a couple meetups in different places in the city. Maybe some collaborations, maybe a workspace. Small events here and there, like our barbecues. Where? Well, at this scale, you really actually have to start thinking about the cost of a venue, which is something I'll come back to later with regards to inclusivity. If you have to start charging people for entry, or if you have to find a venue that will give you the space for free for a reason, then things get complicated. How you grow at this scale? Establishing what you stand for, making your messaging clear, letting people know what you'd like to see out of them, and encouraging them to come out and show their work. The takeaway at this scale, this is where you have to start thinking about how much work you're putting in. So at this scale, don't overextend yourselves. Even if you can benefit a lot of folks, even if you have a lot of folks coming to your meetups, try to get people coming back by being welcoming, celebrate local successes, but don't run yourself into the ground trying to be the next big thing. Metropolitan scale. Some of you may know this particular scale if you come from an especially big or an especially broad city. A lot. There's a lot of people. They're all over the place. What usually happens at this scale? Multiple smaller groups, fragmented, multiple meetups scattered around. And where are they? They're wherever serves the people that they're trying to work with. So the meetup for this particular group of people might be closer to this part of the city or that part of the city. At this point, it sort of just happens and fragments naturally because there's just too many people and too much space. How do you grow? You pick your lane and you focus on it. At this scale, there's not a lot you can do to try to get all of the different industries or all of different sides of the business together. You can't get AAA people and indie people and business people and art people, all these people into the same room every month, assuming you can afford a room that can fit them all. So at a certain point, you have to say, well, we're going to focus on this kind of game developer, this kind of game creator, and we're going to work with them as best we can and encourage other people to come out all the same. So the takeaway at this scale is you can't cover everyone. You just can't. Across AAA, indie, even if those divisions are arbitrary, you can't. So be clear about your aims, find folks who share them, and work with them. Money. So say you've got no money. You find folks online. You volunteer your time. You don't dream too big. Please don't. Look for local support where you can find it, but be reasonable, be realistic, and borrow equipment and don't borrow money. Just really don't. Because if you don't have money coming in, someone's got to pay it sooner or later. Your takeaway at this scale, make sure you're not the only person putting in the work or the money. Be upfront about it being on the cheap. People won't mind. And look for shortcuts where you can. Say you're an arts collective like we are. You might be able to find some local funding from schools, arts organizations, whatever. Your mileage may vary a lot with this because some cities have a lot of art support and some don't. Some countries have a lot of art support and some don't. This takes some work. Someone's got to go out there and fill out the paperwork and take a swing at stuff like this. But there are people out there who can help you navigate that process. Talk to local artists, talk to local designers, folks who might have been involved in any kind of arts funding. And be prepared to start pitching yourself and your scene. Bring it together. Get an idea of what you stand for. Get an elevator pitch for what you do for your city and for your scene. Takeaway at this scale, the funding is out there, but it's not free. Someone has to do the work. So do your research, do some reading, talk to folks who have done similar things, get connected. I'm not a lawyer. This might be even more complicated or less complicated where you are. Maybe you could become a nonprofit, like the Hand-Eye Society in Toronto. Being a nonprofit is really complex. There's a lot of paperwork because they want you to pay your taxes. Someone still has to keep and track the money that comes into a nonprofit, even though it's a nonprofit. The money has to be very clearly monitored, maintained, and tracked. Once again, others can help you navigate this process, like Jim Monroe of the Hand-Eye Society, who at this point just goes from scene to scene like a Johnny Appleseed, just sort of talking to people about how to grow their scene. I highly recommend you look him up. But again, you have to be prepared to pitch yourself in your scene, because if you're going to look for government funding, if you're going to look for charity support, you're going to have to do it. So your takeaway at this level, running a nonprofit, even a small one, is a full-time job. Look at all your possibilities before going ahead with it, and don't jump the gun. You could incorporate. Being a corporation is easier than a nonprofit, kinda. There was a talk earlier that covered this. There's still a lot of paperwork. You still have to file taxes. Someone still has to keep in track the money. And sometimes you need to have a board of directors and stakeholders, which might be a little bit of a problem if it's just you running the show. But you may have to incorporate if you want to run actual spaces, whether they're workspaces or permanent locations for your meetups. Also, you're not going to get rich doing this, ever. Event planning is such a crapshoot. Even the really financially successful event planning, like running conventions, is such a crapshoot. So don't plan for that. Beyond a certain amount of money coming in and out, incorporating makes sense, because it's the easiest way to protect yourselves for that amount of money. But unless you intend to run it as a business, it might be less practical than just not, which is why we are a not-for-profit arts collective and not a non-profit. So initiatives, things you can do to improve your scene. Equipment. This seems like a simple one, but it's actually kind of important. Just ask for donations. Look to businesses, schools, whatever you can. Borrow if you need to. Get involved in local events and local spaces that could be potential venues or could loan you potential hardware like hacker spaces or other things like that. Get stuff secondhand if you have to. And most importantly, cheap is better than none. The Dirty Rectangles have been running on a 1024 by 768 VGA projector for a very long time. Did you know that you can buy a $15 connector that'll do HDMI to VGA these days with audio out? It's actually pretty good. I mean, it's awful, but it's pretty good. Don't overdo spending on equipment ever, because if you don't have a reliable cash inflow, someone's got to pay, or someone has already paid, and you're probably going to be stuck with the bill. So look around at what you can get nearby, which also helps you network. Jams. Jams always sound like a great idea. Everybody loves game jams to a certain extent. But jams take a surprising amount of organization beyond just you and 4 people in your living room. Registration, are you planning it out? Are you going to have more people coming in? Do you need a venue if you have more people coming in? Are you going to feed people? How are you going to lock the place down at night to keep people's laptops from being stolen? Running a jam out of your living room is easy enough, and folks mostly know what to expect when you do that. Anything beyond that is way more complex, and people are going to have much bigger expectations of you. It's well worth doing, but you need to plan. Co-working spaces. Man, these sound like a great idea. They also cost a mint. Rent, upkeep, maintenance. You're literally running a building and all the things associated with running a building. And you have to think about the location of it and also the security. Are you going to lock the whole place down very carefully? Are you going to buy security cameras? Where is it located in your city? How accessible is it to people? Can they take the bus there? Do they have to drive? Also, can you guarantee you're going to have enough people to break even? Probably not. So the trick is to lowball it as much as you can, but then that might be hard to pitch to a real estate agent or something who's trying to sell you on this space. Actually getting someone to give you a lease in the first place might actually just be really hard. You might have to be prepared to put in for like a 3 or 5 year lease, which is a big expectation if it's just you and a few people organizing this with barely any money. And finally, running the space, doing all that doing all that upkeep and maintenance is basically a full-time job. Someone has to check in on the place every day. Just because it seems affordable for the first month or a year doesn't mean it won't be a disaster. Just because you have 12 people signed up for your 12 desks doesn't mean they won't all bail out and leave the city all of a sudden. It costs a lot, it takes a lot of work, and you need to be realistic about running a place like this, as valuable as they are. Having corporate backing can often help step over that hump. Inclusion, probably the most important part. So a code of conduct. This is a place where the rectangles kind of dropped the ball. We didn't have a code of conduct for a long time, and I think it's vitally important now more than ever that you have one for your scene at any scale beyond maybe you and a few friends, but then at least at that scale you can just say, don't be an asshole. So write one. Actually do it. Or borrow and adapt one. But like actually read it and edit it and adapt it and make it work for you. Have one. Establish it, make it available to people, publish it, refer back to it, tell people about it, and remind people of it whenever you need to or whenever possible. There's a very good one at geekfeminism.org. You need one. And if you're not willing to know it and enforce it, yours might as well not exist. So you need one, and you need to actually establish it. And if you want to be an advocate, that means being firm on what is in your code of conduct and being responsible about it. Diversity. Be very open and be very clear and be very public about wanting diversity in your scene. Be very welcoming. If some people don't like that, good. You don't want them in your scene. Like, just straight up. Use your resources and outreach to uplift folks, but don't be condescending. Think about your biases, as talked about in the last presentation. Take people's complaints seriously unless they're complaining about too much diversity. And think about what you say and do before you say and do it. You are the leader here, you are the representative. If someone has a bad experience with you, they're just not coming back. And just say hello to new folks. Encourage them to show their work, be nice and approachable about it. You don't need a reason to want a diverse scene. More perspectives, more ideas, those are nice things, but it's not about that, it's just the right thing to do. Just do it. Lastly, event structure. This is the thing that a lot of people don't actually think about when they're organizing their events. Is it a bar or no bar? Are you excluding people who don't drink? Whether they think they're being excluded or are actually physically being excluded after like 9 p.m., depending on your liquor laws. Is it early or is it late? Is it on a weekday or a weekend? Are you excluding students, indies, industry professionals, people with 9 to 5 jobs? Does it cost money to get in? Are you accidentally excluding anyone? Beyond a certain point, you're going to have to make some adjustments to try to get more people in, and it will benefit you in the long run as long as you don't bend yourself too far. You have to think about your subconscious decisions and their possible impacts, whether it's the venue, the way you run events, the way you speak to people at the events, anything. Don't just default, but remember there are limits to what you can do. You can't change your entire event structure on a whim. There's only so much you can do. Okay, lastly, the realities of doing this. Someone has to do the work. Someone has to show up. And if you get tired and you need a break and you can't make it 1 month, no one's there to replace you unless you have other people there to replace you. So someone has to do the work and you need to plan ahead. People are going to come and go from your scene, especially if you're in an area without a lot of big industry. People are going to move away for different industry jobs, and that's fine. Turnover is actually pretty good for a scene. It can be super healthy, especially with new students coming in and encouraging each other to come in. And people will come back and support your scene if you support them. You can't cater to everyone. You can't. Like, we'd like to, but it's just actually physically impossible. Like, it's not practical, so do what you can, include as many people as you can, but so it goes. You're responsible for what you create and what you allow to happen. If you make a meetup where shitty things happen to people, if you make a meetup where lousy things happen to people, whether you intended for that to happen or not, it's happened, and you're responsible. And in the end, also just, be kind, be nice. A lot of other people are in this. They're having a very difficult time. They're creatives who are working very hard, maybe on evenings or weekends, or they're grinding out a 9 to 5 job. Even a creative job takes a lot out of people. So be welcoming, be approachable, and be nice. That's it. Thank you. Quick shout outs to Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto, Chicago, Lexington, San Francisco, New York City, LA, Austin, Melbourne, Berlin, Utrecht. Is that how you pronounce it? Tokyo, and some other folks. And if you want to find me, my Twitter is @JonahD. No shoutouts to Twitter. And you can find my stuff at hangmandesign.com and our stuff at dirtyrectangles.com. Thank you. Also, that's my dog again. Any questions? Go for it.
All right, so what is something that when you first started, it worked better than you could have ever imagined? And on the flip side of that, what is something you wish, well, I think you went through something, wish somebody would have told you?
So when we first started, the thing that worked out way better than we could have expected was, I'd say actually the encouraging students to come out. And it sounds silly, but like, that's a thing that sounds great on the face of it. But what you actually have is you have a network there of people who are working together and constantly working on new things. And by encouraging students to come out, they encourage other students to come out. They encourage other people to show their work. If they have a good experience, they'll come out. If they meet cool people in the scene, they'll come out because they want to network too. So we have a very student-focused scene in Ottawa with a high rate of turnover as a result, but I think it's actually really, really good because of that. And students who have gone on to be successful stuck around and kept the scene alive. And things that haven't worked out, okay, I'd say early on, rather than having a code of conduct, what we instead was just, we sort of had like an anonymous like email thing where people could email us and like give feedback or whatever. Nobody ever used it. Nobody ever uses those. You actually have to put yourself out there. You have to say, contact me, or contact them if I do something shitty and I can't be trusted. You have to put yourself out there. You have to put yourself at risk, because someone's going to have to deal with it, and it's going to have to be you. And a lot of people, especially jerks, will say, if you go to them and say, we got a lot of people anonymously commenting, or we got a lot of people commenting, unspoken, anonymously, commenting about you, they might just say, oh, I don't believe you. Like, we actually had someone say that to our faces. And we literally had to run them out of the meetup, so to speak, because they were just treating people really badly. So you have to very clearly establish those lines, because if you establish them in a vague way, people will take advantage of you. Thank you.
It ain't no game, but they saying welcome to the second level.